a proof on them. And no individual, now corporation's different, but no individual has to fill out a 1040 tax form. So what we do is we have tax packages that we sell for $25. I believe maybe it's 35 for the full package, but and I've got over 1,000 clients, and none of them has ever been prosecuted by the IRS. But that package is documents that you send to the United States and the IRS, and you require that they send you a sworn statement to your taxability, and by law they have to do it. And if they don't do it and they continue to try to tax you, you can sue them for you can actually prosecute them criminally, or have them prosecuted criminally successfully, and then use that evidence for in a civil suit for damages.
So you're saying if the tax man comes, I send him the form that you write,
Mm-hmm.
and he comes again unlawfully at this point because
Right.
they have failed to prove up my debt to them.
Because what happens when he comes again? Your wife threatens to divorce you.
Yeah, and so now
Or it
I'm
makes you
damaged.
very nervous. You
Yeah.
know, it's the people.
It's
Some
harassment.
people cannot handle that.
It's harassment. It's not just harassment. It's deprivation of civil rights
Yes.
under color of law. I mean, they're
Yes.
coming. They're saying this is the law. It's not the law.
Because some people will say, "Prove it, Mister," or the other person will say, "Where do I sign?"
Yeah.
and that's not biblical.
And they're counting on you to say, where do I sign? Just get me out of this uncomfortable.
They're scared to death to
You
spend.
have you have a gun,
Mhm.
and you're going to take me to jail if I don't.
Yeah, I've been arrested many times, and I don't have any trouble being arrested. And when they're taking my picture, oftentimes they ask me, "Why are you so comfortable, content with this?" I said, "Well, this is money in the bank." Because they don't have probable cause. They don't have written law to support what they did. This is money in the bank.
Oh my goodness.
And just for example, this one individual that a friend of mine worked with, they took his house for property taxes. They showed up and drug him out of his house roughly, injured his shoulder, shot his dog,
Oh my.
burned his meager property in the house, sold the house. 5 years later, my friend got him over $38 million and the house back.
Wow.
So the worst day the worst day of his life, in a way, turned out to be the best thing ever happened to him.
In the words of Bobby Swagger, you don't understand. They killed my dog. I'm coming for him.
And that's why if they were to do that to me, I would be smiling in my mugshot, because cha-ching.
And so
I might not get 38 million, but I'm going to get
something.
paid well for my time here.
I mean, the U.S. government's gotta know they can't do that.
So as far as taxes go, they have to prove that you're a person taxable. They have to prove that the activity that you're engaged in, where your income comes from, is taxable. They have to prove that your activity occurred inland, where the written law that they're relying upon has force and effective law. So they have to prove those three things. And most Americans are not in those classifications. Most Americans make their living, their income, their wages, the produce of their efforts, or of their sweat and blood. It's a right. It's a God-given right. It's not a state right. See, when they say state right, they're not talking about the Bill of Rights. Don't let a, they'll when you're in a U.S. court, they'll talk about you have a right to this, you have a right to that. If that court has jurisdiction over you, you don't have any rights. They're just calling it a right. It's a privilege granted by the legislature, and it's said that way for deception. Remember, I told you that the constitutions that were produced later on, they took out the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
It's a completely different constitution. The first constitution went defunct because of the bankruptcy. And the second constitution is a replacement. It's supposed to be a temporary replacement for the operation of a government, not the government. And and that one's operating under complete statutory law and not as a right.
So we'll talk about when the United States government went bankrupt and how that was really relevant in just a little bit. And also, we're going to talk more about some of these very interesting solutions you have for people and their taxes. We'll be right back, folks. We're coming up on a hard break. You've been listening to When Opinions Collide. I'm here with Paul J. Hansen. And welcome back. You've been listening to When Opinions Collide. I'm your host, Jonathan Fiala, and I am joined once again by Mr. Paul J. Hansen. We were just talking about the Constitution and the United States bankruptcy and how the original Constitution was defunct. Would you mind enlightening my listeners about this?
It actually may not be defunct. It may just be pushed to the side without our knowledge of its being mothballed in a sense.
We're operating underneath the premise of a different constitution, you're saying.
They're operating under it. The original Constitution may activate and still may work with the aggregate, the man of the land. And man is male, female. It makes, God created man in His image.
And they would be the bureaucracies, the IRS, the ATF, FDA.
Whoever is making a claim against you, that man has to produce the evidence to support that claim. That's the most important thing that anybody can learn from studying law is make them produce their claim. If they're trying to claim that you owe a parking ticket, a speeding ticket, you got to register your car, you got to pay property taxes, federal taxes, state taxes. Just seek out the man that's making the claim and make him produce the evidence of that claim. And then you have the rest of your life to study that evidence. So if you find out it's not proper evidence, you can go back into court and say, hey, foul, this is not evidence that I owe tax. And people have done that actually hundreds of years later when certain laws were passed or certain lands were taken away from Indians, for example, or even Native the whites. Some land was taken away, and hundreds of years later was given back because they showed that they didn't have a law to do it. But anyway, okay. As far as taxation goes, like I said, they have to prove that it applies to the person, the activity, and the activity. Now, and we're bringing in the issue of the bankruptcy of the United States. You can actually question some of that and cause the court to be very concerned about what you might bring forth and do that to your advantage. The court will usually quickly find out, the prosecutor will quickly find out if you have knowledge to prevail, or if you're working with somebody that has knowledge to prevail. If they find that out, they generally will walk away from the IRS case. If that's not the case, and they've researched you, they tapped your lines. We have clients that we have found the IRS tapping the phone lines. I guarantee you, the United States IRS has access to all your phone calls. They don't get a court order to go and preview them or anything like that. They just go. They go and go through them. They go through all your trash. But if they can find out that you're a weak target, if you're a soft target, they'll prosecute you, and they'll use their trickery in court because you're ignorant of how to defend yourself. And even though defending yourself is very simple, keep the burden of proof on them. But most people, for example, if you go into the U.S. court and they just ask you if you're a U.S. citizen, if you say yes or no, you're going to lose your case. If you say yes, the court can use that as evidence of a nexus for taxation. If you say no, the prosecutor will say prove it. Can't prove a negative, you're going to lose you're going to look really bad in front of the jury, and the judge is going to use that as against you. That's why you say, I have no evidence. When they say, John, are you a U.S. citizen? What would you say? We've talked about this.
We've talked about this off air. You would say something to the effect of, I have no evidence in my possession that I have ever made an oath or affirmation.
Election.
Okay.
Yeah. Election is a contract.
Okay.
So I have no evidence in my possession I've ever elected to become a United States citizen.
Okay.
And I've done that with myself and co-defendant in Florida. We were the first people to win a case in Florida in 9 or more years, and not a single person has ever won a case against the IRS in Northern District of Florida. And that was one of their key questions. And both of us, my co-defendant listened to me and understood why he needed to not say yes or no. And he's just simply said, I understand that words are very important in a U.S. courtroom. Therefore, I have no evidence in my possession I ever elected to become a United States citizen. And that's a big step in the right direction of winning your case. And so when they try to offer evidence that you do owe a tax or you made income in the state or whatever, you just the proper objections and make sure that get the man that claims that is taxable activity is in the witness stand, so you can ask him what he relies upon that is within the scope of the taxing written laws.
So you're saying I would have to subpoena the arresting IRS agent?
No, they're going to put evidence in, and they have to tell you where that evidence comes from, and
who compiled the data.
Right.
Wrote the report.
And then you're going to tell them that you're going to challenge foundations of that document, and they'll say, and then you can ask them, who is the person that's going to produce evidence of foundation for that document? Let's just say it's a 1040 tax form. They'll say John or David Smith. And then you say, okay, thank you. And you subpoena, our clients will subpoena David Smith also. So the IRS will be scratching their head like, we subpoenaed him and they subpoenaed him too. And then this doesn't look good.
It's
This
kind of
guy,
scary.
this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
When I get a speeding ticket, I always subpoena the officer. And I mean, those guys come to court and said, nobody's ever subpoenaed me before. They always hope I don't show up. They never subpoena me. See, when you subpoena them, they're your witness. You can direct examination, put them under direct examination with your questions. If you do not subpoena them, they are somebody else's witness, and you can only cross-examine in relationship to the questions that were first posed to them, which are, they make sure that they only ask questions that is in their favor, not in, but not damaging them. So you definitely want to let the IRS know that you're going to subpoena every witness they subpoena. And they're going to know right away, like, this guy knows how to beat the IRS. We beat the IRS over 50 times, or I should say the guy that taught me the tax code beat the IRS over 50 times. Most lawyers never beat the IRS ever. That same guy was probably killed by the government. He was doing just fine, and they found him dead. But which is common with people that cost the government a great deal of exposure. But don't worry about it. They're not going to do that to any of us. We don't. They might do it to me, but that's it's because I'm a lot higher than most people on their charts of exposure. But with the internet, if they would kill me, there's still thousands of people with my material and 10 or 20 people that are ready to take over the disbursement of it, as I am today. So they wouldn't gain anything. And I've had death threats from the government, and
Yikes.
And I reported it immediately to the proper authorities, and the guys that understood the reality of death threats is just get on the internet and tell as many people as possible. And that's the best way you can prevent it from ever happening. And make sure that upon your death that the information will be continued, just dispersed, maybe even more so. So, and with the internet, a great deal of the knowledge I have is working through people that I've met through the internet connections. A tremendous amount of it. Been very difficult without that. So, and as far as federal or state taxes on your income, the number one thing is to get a hold of us. And I'll just give you my web address. Paul, you can connect me several ways. Paul J.J. Hansen, Hansen, pauljjhansen.com. And the other one is freeinhabitant.info. Freeinhabitant.info. And you can always contact me. My relevant numbers and addresses. I travel all over the country. Contact mailing addresses, but email is the best way to get a hold of me, or us, I should say. So, what I recommend people to do if they want to challenge. Today, I was standing in line for half an hour at the post office, and I started explaining taxation to somebody, and a lady came up to me and says, "Can I have your email address? Because I'm very interested in what you're talking about." And I told her, we got 1,000 clients that use this program, and the IRS has never touched any of them. None of them.
Really?
Not a single one of them. They'll send threatening letters, but people will send the letters to us, and we'll lay the letter in front of us over the internet, and we'll say, take a look there. There's no sworn statement on that document. There's no signature on a lot of the documents. That letter is nothing. That letter cannot be evidence in a courtroom. It's bluff. Just write them back and tell them to send you a sworn assessment. And then we give them the law that requires the IRS to do that. And then there's a provision of people having to validate the debt. So there's two provisions in Congress that they have to validate the debt on, and we use both of them. And if they don't, and they continue, you can file a criminal complaint against them. You can actually go for a grand jury indictment, and most importantly, is you can go for it's called civil damages. And just stand in front of the jury and tell the jury that the government spends so many $1 million per minute, and I'd like to have one of those minutes out of the year for the damage they've done to me. And the jury looks at each other and goes, that's pretty reasonable.
I would say so.
Yeah, most jury goes, sounds like, $3-4 million sounds like a lot of money, but it's not to the United States. Just 1 minute, and the jury will go, if we don't do punitive damages at least to that level, it's like nothing. It's nothing to the United States the way it is.
It's not even a blip on their radar.
No, but at least it's something. At least it's something, and it's a lot to you.
Yeah.
So it makes it much more bearable to stand up against them.
Well, especially when they do things that are punitive to you, like they're damaging you.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely important.
Let's talk about. Let's say you go down and you sign up for IBM to work with IBM, and they'll slide a paper across the table and they'll ask you to fill out a W-9, and if you want to fill out the W-9, they're going to withhold taxes from you. But you say, I'm going to take the W-9 and I'm going to take it to my legal counsel. And you don't have to say, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a lawyer, but I'm not an attorney. Attorney is licensed by the state or the Supreme Courts of the state. And then you just come to me and I'll show you how to fill out a W-8 form. W-9 is for a taxpayer, a U.S. person. W-8 is for somebody that doesn't require tax withholdings.
So that's a form in the system.
Yep, that's a form in their system. And then we put an affidavit. It's a form that allows an amended affidavit to go with it. So we take the W-8, we put our affidavit with it to basically let them know that they're working with somebody that knows how to stop them in any tax court. And we go ahead and put our name right on it. Just to let them know that, these guys have stopped everybody in tax court, or not tax court, but U.S. courts already, and they'll just back off and generally tell your employer to go ahead and pay these guys in full, and we will contact you if or when taxes need to be withheld.
Wow.
So your employer is supposed to take that W-8 and the affidavit, keep it secure, and in the event, they don't even have to notify the IRS of it. But they're supposed to have it in their possession of evidence that, like you, for example, John gave it to us, and we believe John. Here's his affidavit. There's no evidence that he's taxable, and that takes them completely off the liability. Completely off liability.
So it makes it safe for your employer.
Yeah. Doesn't take you off the liability, but it takes them off. Yeah, they can rest at ease that the IRS is never going to come back on them for back taxes. And then you get your payment in full. We had an individual that made. I'm trying to think how much he made. He made a lot of money. Can't remember how much. It's thousands and thousands of dollars per month. I think it was like $30,000 a month or something. But and he was a high-level engineer. He worked on nuclear plants, and there was 1,100 engineers that worked for this company, I think, and he was the only one they didn't withhold on. Because he was a lawyer, and he specialized in taxes, and he read the entire Title 26 IRS tax code book, understood it, very analytical in that sense, and he knew just put the W-8 in and so forth, affidavit, and his employer says, we're going to pay you without any withholdings. You can receive it as cash or check, either way you want. And I think he took it in cash every week. And the employer just asked, don't talk to other people about it, and we'll be just fine.
Yeah,
because the big engineering company called the IRS, and the IRS said, "Yep, go ahead and do that."
Yeah. So, wow, that's really amazing that works. And so all of that has to do with, I mean, the fact that there's a W-8 in the system.
Yeah, people don't even know about it.
That's amazing. So,
Mhm.
and what you're saying is that's a
It
provision.
it doesn't look on the surface that it's the fitting document for you, but
Yeah,
with the affidavit attached, it serves its purpose.
yeah,
So it looks like a document that would make somebody exempt or something, but you never want to take an exempt position, because an exempt position is a taxpayer that they say doesn't have to pay taxes. See, you're taking the position that there is no evidence that you're a taxpayer, and therefore they have no right to withhold. Now, if they do withhold, you can sue that employer for violating your rights. I don't like to say the word civil rights. It's just rights. Just rights.
your God-given rights.
God given. You can say God given rights. That's not a problem. The jury will understand that. The trouble with civil rights is they there are acts in Congress that are called the Civil Rights Acts.
Sure.
So kind of stay away from that word civil
Yeah,
rights.
they're sort of related to
What's
race
the
relations.
yeah? What's the main one?
The
Civ, 2 or
1960,
something, Civil
yeah,
Rights
Civil
Act.
Rights Act
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
is what everyone marched for.
You don't want to sound like you're part of that.
Yeah.
Even though that's not evidence that you are, it's just better to stay away from those words.
Well, it's better to focus on what's relevant in the case at hand and not conflate.
Right, right. And if you ever do use the word citizen or rights or state or a term that they use, just make sure you define it at the bottom of your document.
Sure.
And you'll be all right.
So, man, that's crazy. So just to kind of recap this segment, we started off with talking about how the Constitution was undermined during
Mhm.
the 1933 bankruptcy, and I think we did actually kind of skip over this. We didn't talk too much about how you were saying that there's a secondary set of documents for a lot of state documents, and you were alluding to
For example, I'll explain that a little bit. There's an individual in Washington. His name's Lewis Ewing. He's a loose cannon, but he's kind of a genius in his own way. He's very much a loose cannon, but you got to give him credit. He's a researcher, but he actually went into the archives of the Washington State. It's called the Walla Walla Convention, I think it's called. It's way back, and he found the archives of the original Constitution, and he got them certified. Now you can't get them certified anymore. For some reason, they can't find them anymore.
they can't find them.
But
Wow.
he did get them certified, and you lay it out side by side, and they're mirrored constitutions, except the boundaries are not included.
So
So
tell my listeners what a boundary
the aggregate part. Okay, when you're standing on the soil, you're part of the land. You're part of they use it. The word aggregate. You're part of the substance.
Sure.
A corporation is not part of the substance. It's a creation in our mind. But the aggregate is part of the dwelling on the land, and
dirt and flesh.
yep. And that can be the operation of that aggregate can be measured in a 3-dimensional space, and we referred to that as land. So never go and say your land is property. You have, as a man, you have land, and then you have property in that land.
Oh.
One of those properties in that land might be the right to bear arms, the right to free speech, the right to plant your corn. Okay, but there's a distinction. Land is a 3-dimensional space, and then you have property.
Property is a concept surrounding
Property is
real
different. Property is different than land.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a concept plus probably a lot more.
It's an intangible concept about intangibles or tangible items.
Right. You could have a genius idea.
That's your intellectual
and it's property, but it's not land.
Correct.
Property. Yeah. So I always say that the government is trying to tax my land, and the property in that same land.
So just to sort of wrap this up in a nice little bow, or try to, you're saying that with the removal of the boundaries in the Constitution, boundaries referring to
They didn't remove the from the Constitution. They created a new Constitution for a purely corporate entity, not of the aggregate, not of the land.
okay,
IBM doesn't have any land boundaries in its charter. It's not that type of an entity. But the state of, like Nebraska, for example, the original Constitution has land boundaries.
but the current state, the corporation,
It won't have boundaries on it,
won't have boundaries on it.
and they don't want to talk about it in court.
Wow.
And they make it very difficult to get the certified copy of those documents. Now,
So
you got to remember, at one time, the Constitution said that you're not allowed to basically be a licensed attorney in the United States, an esquire.
because that was a British,
13th Amendment. Guess what? A fire in 1812, I think, disappeared.
really?
And then they went to all the states and they tried to get all those documents, and they brought them back and tried to destroy them. There's only a few of them left, but it's very, very hard to get a hold of those documents. I don't like to use the word very, very, but occasionally I do. It's hard to get those documents, and it's intentional because they federal government is massive today. The original Constitution forbid that. The federal government is not allowed to use Federal Reserve notes. It's unconstitutional. They do it.
That would be our dollar bills.
Yep, because it's not supported. It's not a true negotiable instrument because it doesn't represent any real value.
It's a fiat currency. It's not based in gold. If there was a gold dollar for
Yep.
every physical dollar running around, it would be constitutional.
That's right. But if you take a Federal Reserve note today back to the maker, what do you get?
No,
A new piece of paper.
you get nada. You get a worthless
You get another piece of paper.
cloth.
You
yeah,
never get anything but that piece of paper.
yeah.
And that's unconstitutional because the founding fathers knew that if somebody can make paper and take your land away from you while the rest of the community has to work hard to gather substance to buy the same product, the paper is unequal balances, unequal. It's unequal in society biblically. It's sin.
Well, it's created fractionalized banking, which is
Cause all kinds of problems.
amazingly wildly profitable, but ultimately might be the end of the world economic system at some point. It'd have to be restructured after it all crashes. But the reason markets are so crazy is because of that. But so
Let
okay.
me say one little comment on the Federal Reserve. Let's just say you had 100 people on an island, and everybody had 100 $1 bills in their hand. And but one of those individuals was Uncle Sam. And when he wanted to do something, he just turned around and cranked this machine. But nobody knew it. And he'd walk out and he'd buy this and buy that and buy that. And that's what's happening with the Federal Reserve.
Stealing.
It's stealing.
He's stealing from our
Because
coffers.
if the people with the $100 bills in their pocket could feel that $100 bill, those $100 bills shrinking in their pocket, they'd pull it out and they could watch it shrink.
They'd be mad.
What's going on here? Then there'd be a riot in the street. But this guy does it silently. He cranks that lever, does it silently, steals their ability to buy, but he gets to buy. And so every time the government puts out $1 trillion of money into circulation,
They're stealing
they're
$1 trillion.
They're stealing from everybody that has the $100 in their pocket.
Whether it's the mom and pop at home or the Chinese that are invested in our market.
So
But-
if you have $100,000 in the bank and 20 years later you pull it out and try to buy something,
It won't be the same.
you're horribly disappointed. And
Absolutely.
sometimes in history, you're really horribly disappointed.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get to take that $100,000 out and you get to go down and buy a loaf of bread. Used to buy a house.
Yep.
Now it buys a loaf of bread.
Well, in like Zimbabwe and some of those
Yep,
other nations.
yep.
So, to wrap this show up in a little bow, what you're saying is the income tax, the tax on one's home, because you have a right to own land, not property, land, and you have the right to do business. Those were never constitutionally taxable. They've only been taxed by the government. By actually, we've allowed them to do that.
Deception.
We've
Well,
allowed
most
them
of it by
to do it.
deception.
But if you're in the state of Colombia, or if you're living on government land,
District of
or
Columbia.
District of Columbia, excuse me, they're trying to make it a state. District of Columbia, or you're in the military, or what have you, you've made a nexus, and there are exceptions to what you're saying in that you've made an agreement by being on their land, working for them. That's when you have to pay taxes. But otherwise, the income tax is voluntary.
Yes, it's all relationships with the United States are voluntary.
My goodness.
So if they're able to tax you, it's because of something that you consented to. Now you can actually go to court, and they have to prove that your contract is conscionable. Conscionable means that you were actually aware of it.
So you have to be conscious of the act of
yeah,
enrolling in the contract.
Let's just say you are in a high income bracket, and they disclose to you that all these taxes, we were taking 70% of your labor away from you. You would go, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I'm out of here. So, if you're in that position, and if you're looking for Mr. Hansen's services, the wealth of knowledge that he has, where'd be a good place to find you? One more time, give us your website and your email.
The number one thing is freeinhabitant.info. Just go up to the About section, click on it. My phone number, my email address will be there. My email address is Paul J.J. Hansen, Hansen, law. Paul J.J. Hansen, law @gmail.com.
Mr. Hansen, thank you.